Last year I completed building my dream backyard lake, but now in the new year I have a bit of a problem. Last summer those fish do what fish do and decided to have lots of baby fishies. Science! And despite my best efforts while the fish were spawning to try and reduce some of the amount of fish that I would end up having, think of me as a fisherman. But sadly, I still ended up with thousands of baby carp in Kev's pool. And once we started seeing all of those baby carp, I introduced some perch to the lake, which is a small predatory fish that I thought was going to help try and decrease some of their numbers.
Hey, go get them. Oh, he swam into the bank, that one.
However, despite my slightly unorthodox methods and employing a very persistent heron to try and do his best work too, I have still ended up with what I believe to be a hell of a lot of baby fish in that lake. So that is going to leave me with a problem heading into the spring, and I've got to do something about it. The problem with letting a watercourse get overrun with thousands of little fish is that it can cause many issues with the biodiversity of the lake. And this is what that basically means. Death. This can be a result of fish waste and decomposing organic material can produce ammonia. Essentially, fish really bad for fish. And this, if it builds up, can actually cause the fish to die. The water can become dirty and stinky from all those fish inside it, and that can lead to really poor water quality, which results in a drop in oxygen levels, which means you'd have an oxygen crash, basically killing anything that's in the lake. Too many fish can create a breeding ground for algae in the lake, which is never good, and a lot of it can then kill all of the fish in the lake as well. Now, I'm not a major fan of too many people, and if I get overrun with them, I tend to get stressed. Oh! And it's the same for the fish too. If there's too many fish in the lake behind me, the bigger, slower, kind of older fish tend to get quite overstressed. That can also lead to them dying. Disease. This is something that can affect lots of fisheries, and with more fish increases the chance of disease coming into play within the lake. And the most common disease to hit fisheries in the UK is known as KHV, koi herpes virus, which actually affected, when I was younger, a lake down the road from me that we've been to before, Horseshoe, and wiped out around 50% of the stock at the fishery. Other issues include stunted growth, the fish may not grow to their full size, breeding issues with the likelihood of the fish successfully breeding decreases, and an ecosystem imbalance. The entire pond ecosystem could basically collapse if you allow it to come out of balance and get overrun. So this year, 2025, I'm going to have to do something about this, and I think that I've got just the idea. I'm going to be netting Kev's pool and building a stock pond. Genius! So what is a stock pond? Stock ponds are smaller pools of water that fisheries typically have to grow on their fish for the future. Stock ponds are usually around the 10th of the size of the actual fishery that the fish come from in the first place, and normally they're a couple of meters deep. We were actually stood on the edge of a stock pond for Horseshoe Lake last summer for a video, and many fisheries I grew up with all had their own stock ponds too. So this began the question of, should I build a stock pond here on my own land at Fowler Fisheries? Or could I build a stock pond somewhere else? And I had just the place that I thought might work. Despite a year of hard work, I sadly wasn't able to get planning permission on the other venue that I've been trying to open, Folly View. Many of you might have seen our previous videos on it. I wasn't able to get the planning permission on Folly View because of one major problem.
Newts.
But around 250 metres away on the same land lies this long, narrow pool. Its water area is actually around the same size as the entire of Kev's pool, and the depth is about the same too. It's naturally spring-fed and has a brilliant water flow too, with the inflow and outflow constantly moving to help keep those fish healthy all year round. However, one problem with the pond is that it doesn't feature an otter fence, which I'd have to build, and otters recently decimated a local park lake not too far away, meaning they really are around the local area. So that means that I would have to build a rather large otter fence around that long narrow pool. And even if I managed to do this, and it would cost several £1,000s, the fact that the pipes where the water comes into it are buried quite deep underground mean the otters could just run through from the natural water course anyway, and at one end where the water comes out there's a bridge, and I really don't know how we'd get over that with the otter fence either. So that kind of put that narrow pool out of contention for now. So that means we're back to using the land that we own here in the field. Somewhere in the 3.5 acres of this field I need to find a spot to make the ideal stock pond. So why don't we start looking around where the actual fishery is. Now, due to the issues that I raised with otters being in the local area, ideally the first place that I should start looking or thinking where to build my stock pond is within the otter fence that I've already invested in and currently have on my lake Kev's Pool. But where? Because the otter fence actually hugs the banks quite tightly. On that bank over there, we have the fence that runs down the entire length of it. On this bank behind me here, there's not much gap, if any at all, between the otter fence and the bank. We obviously can't build it on the roads, that only leaves one side. So we're now round at the area that I think is the best possible place to put a stock pond anywhere near Kev's Pool. And it is this far side over here. You can see my bucket there has been placed for a casting challenge that I completely gave up on, to be honest with you. However, this is the biggest space we have inside the current otter fence. And I think this is the perfect place to actually start building the stock pond. However, it is still pretty close to this otter fence in the middle, but I did think what we could potentially do is mark 2 posts, say this one and then 1, 5 or 6 down there, and do it so it's kind of in the middle of everything here. And the pipes that we installed for the drainage from that top ditch all the way down through the field, we could run into these and then have an overflow, because the way the land's like this, down into the lake going that way. So I don't think it'll affect the drainage. Water tends to lie here anyway, so I think it's a good spot. We can have the path still going around the lake. We won't do it too tight to the fence, so it could be there. And if we do it properly and kind of make it a sort of teardrop shape, it actually is about 1/10 of the size of Kev's Pool, which is about the right size for a stock pond. However, as we've all learned before, just digging a hole and hoping for the best never usually goes quite the way that I imagine it.
It's leaking.
For some reason, Damo just couldn't stop breaking dumpers. We have a leak.
Good start.
So the first issue I face is just how wet the ground is. As you can see along this bank here, it is sopping wet as I go through. And if I tried to track the digger through here, as I have done before, and when we actually built that otter fence at the top end of the field, I'm convinced that it might actually cause more mess than it's worth. Throughout this project, I've always come up against water, and I've learned that attempting to do things at the wrong time of year can sometimes cause you so much extra work. So it would appear that maybe right now, as you can see the clay sticking to my boots, isn't going to be the perfect time to dig a stock pond just over there, because I will have to get the digger through this section of land here, and it really doesn't seem like it's worth it. Also, we're waiting for this piece of ground to fully dry out so that Kevin can come back in a couple of months' time and start topsoiling it. This was the only bank that never had enough topsoil on it. We want to get that sorted, and then once that's done, it will be much easier to get a digger over to that side of the lake over there. It'll all be a bit drier, and we'll be able to build that stock pond. But even if I wanted to build it now over there, legally, could I? Planning permission. Yes, I would need that all-important planning permission to build a tiny stock pond on my own land. Now, for an area this size where we're planning to build the stock pond, probably moving a few of the posts of the otter fence just out slightly round it so we can make it how we want it to be, I would need to definitely enlist my best digger skills. And planning dictates that for any project that requires the use of machinery like that, I would need that all-important planning permission. Since gaining planning permission to build my own venue, I had some bumps in the road along the whole process. I may have just made Kev's Pool slightly bigger than what was on the original plans. 42% to be precise. Now, as much as that's a big percentage, this one is even bigger. 67% of you not subscribed to this channel, and we've built all of this, and it's cost a lot of money. So if you could, please, could you hit that subscribe button and support the channel as we go for our first plaque and get to 100k this year. So this meant that I had to get retrospective planning permission for Kev's Pool and the lodge over there, because some onlookers may have dobbed me in, and my lodge here. So even though normally most people just get on and build ponds of this size, I'm convinced that if I do anything out of the realms of the by the book of planning permission, I will be thrown in a jail cell. We have also recently had Kevin complete some tasks such as block paving our main entrance to sign off what are known as planning conditions. These planning conditions are special lines on the final grant of planning permission that have to be signed off, making sure that you're abiding by all of them. Some of them I don't really understand how they do that, but there's kind of physical and non-physical ones too. So some of the non-physical ones are like, I'm only allowed a certain amount of people in the lodge. They're only allowed to stay for a certain amount of time. There's no green tents allowed to be set up anywhere in the vicinity of the lake at all, otherwise you will be bombed. And they've also had to do some physical things too. Like this. This is my new block paving entrance. Now this is to our entire property, the bit that goes up to where me and Mum's houses are and the bit that goes to the fishery. And before, all of this was just stones, like behind you here, and a clip of it before what it looks like now. Now of course, very happy with how my new block paving entrance looks, very fancy, must say. But it was rather expensive. The lovely people at our old business Pavestone did help us out with these block paving pave set pieces. I still remember what I used to do. And we've had some large, huge eco drains that Kevin have put in to help get the water into the ditch system, which is where all of that other water goes into out on the road. But the reason that the planners wanted us to put some hard standing materials out here is because of that very busy, really busy, extremely busy gridlock road, because what they were worried about is that the stones that were here would get dragged out onto their precious road and cause carnage. Now that has never happened since 2011, since we have lived here, and no stones have ever made it past that highway line onto that road. However, we had to oblige, we've had this work done so that we can have this planning condition signed off when I send them a photograph. But the best month of the year for netting lakes is actually February, and I wanted to make sure that I had something that enables me to grow on my very expensive fish that are netted out during the period coming up. So I'm going to be building a temporary stock pond here. I know it's not very impressive, that's why I jumped to make it look more impressive, but hear me out. This is my office, and around the other side of my office is this behind me. This used to be a raised bed on what was my dad's allotment, bless him. It's no longer used by me because I don't have a clue how to do any of that and I hate it. So, I've decided that this area could be repurposed for building a temporary stock pond in between the time that I go for planning permission on my other stock pond and get all those conditions sorted and actually building the other stock pond in the field. So I had this idea that I can hand dig an area here, use a pond liner so I'm not messing around with clay to put down in that area, use some of the reeds that have grown out around the lake to put around the edge, maybe use some sleepers to kind of create the edges of it as well. I'm going to attempt to potentially do this myself, which I know is very concerning for many of you watching.
Where's the key? I can't remember how to drive these things.
And then use the posts that are around this area now and some of the mesh fencing to repurpose and create a mini otter fence within all the other fences that we have around the property. Sound like a good idea? Yes. Now trust me, I know that building a stock pond here is not what you guys have been finished, but hang on, before you click off the video, I will be building that one in the field, and this is part one of the series of taking you through the process of having that stock pond out there. But I actually think it could be a good idea to have this kind of incubator stock pond also on the site, so that those initial fish, when they come out really small, you can go through, like Simon and Viv showed us at VS Fisheries, and pick out the ones with the really nice scale patterns and start nurturing them in an environment close to power, close to water, and it should be a little bit more easier before moving them into the adult stock pond out that's a lot larger for them to flourish and grow by the fishery. So in the next video, you will see me begin to build this area into that incubator stock pond and potentially try and complete it in that one too. And I've got a few things up my sleeve for that as well. We're also going to be netting the main lake, Kev's Pool, very shortly coming to the channel. An entirely new project altogether and a very exciting one to do with GURTWINGS. So don't forget, as we mentioned earlier, to please hit that subscribe button because so many of you aren't. It helps me out massively, and check out my podcast Road to Success 2, my digital marketing agency, Tweak Marketing, and all the other things that we've got going on too. I wish you all a very happy new year from me and everybody on the Fowler Fisheries team, and catch you soon. Can you just repeat the sentence you just said to me, please, Kev?
The key for building your pond is to dig the hole before ordering your liner.
So what you're saying is you're really busy
Yeah.
So who do you reckon should dig the hole?
Well, probably not you, but you're probably going to try.